He believes he is guiding her gently back to love. In truth, he is asking a shattered mind to walk barefoot across the ruins of its own past. This is not merely a story about amnesia or romance, it is a study of identity, trauma, and the terrifying idea that memory may not be the only place where love lives. Olivia's forgotten marriage becomes more than a plot twist, it becomes a moral wound. If the heart still recognizes what the mind has lost, then who are we really? Follow this story to the end because beneath its emotional drama lies a haunting truth. Sometimes the most powerful memories are the ones the body keeps in silence.
Olivia's awareness returned not as a wave, but as scattered fragments coalescing into a whole. A profound dissonance hummed beneath the surface, a sense that the very architecture of her reality was fundamentally flawed, even within her own home. While the external world was in order, camera equipment perfectly placed, an internal void spiraled within her. This chasm of memory deepened at her reflection. A foreign face stared back, marked by a blossoming contusion she could not claim as her own. Without a source for the injury, her mind constructed a plausible fiction. A simple, clumsy misstep. This self-deception was a thin barrier, a fragile narrative constructed to hold back the encroaching darkness of an unbelievable truth. The sudden shrill of her phone fractured the silence. Her mother's voice, taut with an ill-concealed anxiety, conducted a careful interrogation disguised as concern. Olivia's reassurances met with responses that were hollow and brittle. The conversation turned to a prescription from a Dr. Reynolds, a name devoid of meaning. A search produced a bottle labeled for post-viral immune support, an artifact from a life lived outside her own recollection. She acquiesced, yielding to the authority in the voice. Her mother continued to spin the tale of a recent virus, framing the medication as essential to her convalescence. Olivia strained to recall any sickness but found only a profound emptiness. Nevertheless, she played her part, accepting the fabricated narrative. A potent, unnamed dread lingered after the call concluded. As she watched the city lights, she perceived herself as an apparition, utterly detached from the life below. The impending gallery exhibition was her only tether to a tangible self. Megan's call from the gallery was a masterpiece of normalization, her words carefully glossing over Olivia's absence. Later, observing her own photographs, she could appreciate their technical merit but felt no echo of the moment of their creation. During the opening, she functioned as an automaton, a ghost executing a flawless social script, while the void of her memory provided a constant, silent hum. Then, the ambient noise receded, and her entire perception collapsed to a single point of focus. She was being observed. This was not the idle gaze of the crowd, but something deliberate and penetrating. Her eyes met his instantly. A man, Giovanni, his suit a study in precision. He registered her attention, and his focus locked with hers. In that instant of mutual recognition, the gallery ceased to exist. The ambient sounds and surrounding people dissolved, leaving only Giovanni. His expression was a landscape of sorrow and hope that resonated with a buried, cellular memory. Her heart began a frantic, percussive rhythm against her ribs. He moved toward her with measured, undeniable purpose. "Your work is remarkable," he stated, his tone seamless. Olivia manufactured a smile, a delicate facade of composure. "Have we not met before?" he inquired. "No," she replied, the denial too swift, betraying the phantom recognition that flickered at the edge of her consciousness. A shadow of tension crossed his features before he expertly shifted the topic. At close range, a faint scar mapped the line of his throat, and it held her gaze captive. "I'm Giovanni," he offered, extending a hand. The moment their skin made contact, a galvanic shock coursed through her, stealing her breath. He maintained the contact, his thumb gently assessing the frenetic pulse at her wrist as his eyes searched hers with an unmasked desperation. "Just static," she offered as explanation. "Not weird," he countered softly. "Unexpected." His correction gave the event significance. "Giovanni, The name was an echo in the vacant halls of her mind, a familiar sound without a source. All logic dictated they were strangers, yet the sheer force of his gaze felt like a spotlight, isolating her from the rest of the world. He drew nearer, his cologne subtly occupying the space between them. "We ought to discuss your collection somewhere more private," he proposed, the professional pretense paper-thin. Every rational fiber of her being screamed against the suggestion, but intuition was overpowering logic. She found herself agreeing, compelled by a force she could not define. For a brief second, an unguarded wave of relief washed over Giovanni's face, a crack in his armor that he sealed almost instantly. He guided her to a secluded cafe, his hand hovering near her back in a gesture that was both protective and proprietary. Once seated, he resumed the pretense, offering praise for her art to maintain the formal structure of their meeting. His questions demonstrated an encyclopedic knowledge of her work, a calculated strategy to build rapport. Yet this polite discourse failed to mask the palpable tension beneath. Each accidental touch of their hands reignited the startling electric jolt. When she inquired about his profession, he offered a deliberately nebulous tale of international commerce. The calculated vacancy of his answer served only to confirm that this was a carefully constructed cover story. "Who are you?" The question escaped her, impulsive and raw. His response was not an answer, but a poetic deflection, a musing on destiny. Before she could pursue it, her mother's name illuminated her phone's screen, a timely interruption. "Family," he observed with an air of foreknowledge. Her mother's voice, strained, returned to the subject of the medication. Her anxious probing confirming the call was a form of surveillance, a scheduled dose of control. Her mother's inquiries were a diagnostic checklist. "Are you feeling dizzy, disoriented?" When confronted, she retreated behind the mask of maternal concern, a gentle dismissal designed to make Olivia question her own sanity. Upon her return, he was preparing to depart, skillfully managing the encounter's conclusion. He presented his card, placing the onus of their next interaction on her. "Sometimes you must trust what you feel," he stated, a clear challenge before vanishing. He departed with the effortless assurance of a man accustomed to command. Her focus fell to the card. Giovanni Moretti. The name was a key to a lock she could not locate, yet it turned something deep inside, releasing a sudden, acute pang of loss. For 3 days, his name was a persistent echo in her mind. At last, the need for answers eclipsed all reason. She dialed the number. He answered immediately, and the way he spoke her name, Olivia, triggered a deep, instinctual shiver. She had anticipated a discussion about art. Instead, a profound silence filled the line. "Dinner," he stated, a command disguised as an invitation. "We can finalize the details." Though every internal alarm was blaring, she heard herself consent. The agreement came before conscious thought. The restaurant was a bastion of understated wealth she'd never registered. The host's disdain evaporated when Giovanni stated his name. "Moretti." The man's entire posture shifted. "Mr. Moretti, right this way." He was shown to a private booth that offered both seclusion and a strategic overview of the room. Wine materialized, poured with reverence. "You're a regular?" she probed. "For many years," he answered, taking his seat with an air of ownership. "The proprietor is a long-time acquaintance." The conversation began to move with a deceptive ease. He did not simply admire her art. He deconstructed it, displaying a disquieting intimacy with her creative mind. "You have a preference for cityscapes," he observed, leaning closer. "And yet your portfolio is dominated by images of storms. Why is that?" The answer rose from instinct, a confession of her fascination with rain's purifying power. As she explained, his features softened, overcome with a palpable, profound relief. It was as if she had provided a missing piece to his own puzzle. "What was that?" she challenged. "That expression, as if I said the one thing you needed to hear." His jaw tensed. "Perhaps you did." More evasion. "I apologize," he said, his hand hovering over hers. "Certain things are difficult to articulate." The arrival of appetizers precluded her response, her exact preferences down to the exclusion of olives. "A fortunate guess?" she asked, her tone sharp. "Observation," he corrected, his hand finally covering hers. The electrical charge returned. The sensation was more potent this time. "You are remarkably transparent," he murmured. She had always considered herself impenetrable, but he saw through her defenses with an intimacy that could only be born from prolonged study. They spoke for hours, orbiting the truth. At times he would slip into Italian, a language she felt on a primal level but could not intellectually process. His English was measured and safe, a stark counterpoint to the intensity in his eyes. "And your family?" he inquired. "They reside in the suburbs." "An older sister, Lauren." "You are close," he asserted, not asked. "Yes, but my mother has grown vigilant, posing odd questions about my health. Perhaps she has cause." The silence that followed was heavy. "It's simple maternal worry," she said, but his tone implied a deeper narrative. He insisted on escorting her home near midnight. The silent streets amplified their footsteps. He maintained a carefully calibrated distance between them, near enough to be a protective presence, yet far enough to maintain propriety. "Will I see you again?" he asked at her door, the pretense of business gone. "No." Her bluntness did not register. "What is it you want?" "To know you," he replied, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw with a slow, reverent pressure. "If you permit it." She did not challenge his unnerving familiarity or the deference he commanded from others. A small nod was her only reply. He withdrew, but the phantom sensation of his touch remained, a brand on her skin. The following day began with a classic maneuver in the lexicon of calculated courtship. 24 white roses, their delivery unsigned, but their origin undeniable. He answered her call of thanks on the first ring, a testament to his anticipation. His invitation was direct, yet it was the final, carefully weighted "please," a performance of vulnerability that ultimately fractured her defenses. From that point, time seemed to compress as Giovanni executed a strategy of omnipresence. His encroachment into her world was rapid, veiled by a veneer of flawless etiquette, a sequence of meticulously engineered coincidences outside her office, following a meeting, along her route home, replaced the randomness of daily life with his orchestrated presence. During a perfunctory call, she broached the subject with her mother, beginning with a simple, "There's a man." Her mother's pitch escalated immediately, a prelude to eager inquiry. After Olivia recounted Giovanni's disquieting intensity, her mother pressed for his identity. The name Giovanni Moretti was met with a pregnant pause, a silence that gave way to an unnervingly enthusiastic, "Oh, darling, that's wonderful." The mother's feigned elation continued, transparent as a poorly staged play. To Olivia's logical objection, she offered hollow reassurances before pressing for an introduction. Olivia's cautious reply was met with more scripted delight, which then pivoted abruptly, a classic misdirection, to a question about the vitamins prescribed by a mysterious doctor. Though having no memory of the prescription's origin, Olivia affirmed her compliance with Dr. Reynolds's regimen. Her mother dismissed her confusion with a vague story of a fabricated illness, a textbook manipulation. The conspiracy of control broadened as another agent, her friend Megan, was deployed to her apartment without warning. Megan arrived with conciliatory offerings, her smile strained by an obvious anxiety. She referenced a conversation with Olivia's mother regarding the new man, and in doing so, confirmed the coordinated nature of the family's actions. Her mother's bizarre enthusiasm was a clear indicator of a unified, clandestine agenda. When Olivia voiced her unease, Megan responded not with comfort, but with a clinical line of questioning about symptoms. The inquiries about her health were a familiar refrain, a script she was now hearing from multiple sources. The conversation inevitably circled back to the vitamins, culminating in Olivia's critical realization. She had no memory of ever meeting this Dr. Reynolds. Megan's involuntary flinch was a confession in miniature. She offered a textbook gaslighting excuse that memory loss was a normal byproduct of a severe sickness. But for Olivia, there was only a void where that illness should be. A vacuum now filled by a man who seemed to possess a history with her she could not access, and a circle of trust that was actively deceiving her. Megan's attempt to physically ground her was undermined by her shifting gaze as she pathologized Olivia's valid suspicions as spiraling. The systematic isolation continued later as her sister Lauren withdrew from a planned dinner, her voice strained with the weight of an unspoken complicity, cloaking the truth in vague complexities. Lauren parroted the family line about Giovanni, a narrative she had received secondhand. Her breezy dismissal of Olivia's concerns was chilling in its simplicity. 2 nights later, Giovanni staged another dinner. While the venue changed, the ecosystem of fear and deference he commanded remained a constant, personified by the staff's behavior. She observed the room, diagnosing the ambient reaction to him as a blend of awe and terror, symptoms of a man wielding immense unseen power. Her direct inquiry was met with a placid, insufficient lie about an import business. When challenged, his expression became an unreadable mask as he offered a tautology. He was intimidating simply because he was. She correctly identified this as a non-answer, but he refused to elaborate, instead using physical contact to shift the emotional landscape. His question, "Can that be enough?" was a strategic appeal to emotion over logic. In that moment, a calculated performance of desperation overrode her instinct for self-preservation, a capitulation she instantly recognized as a critical error. She had to admit an internal paralysis, a magnetic force that defied reason, fear, and the mounting evidence of a grand deception. In the span of just 14 days, Giovanni had integrated himself into the fabric of her existence so seamlessly that the occupation felt almost like a natural evolution. His presence became a constant, a form of soft surveillance disguised as romantic attention. His uncanny prescience, knowing her needs before she did, like producing an umbrella at the first drop of rain, was less charming than it was unnerving. Her remark on the speed of their progression was a profound understatement of the velocity of her own entrapment. Against a backdrop of city lights on dark water, he deflected her observation with a philosophical platitude, reframing predatory speed as subjective perception, his fingers intertwined with hers with an unearned familiarity. When she called out his evasion, he pivoted again, offering her the illusion of control by asking if he should decelerate. His offer was a false choice, and her rejection of it was the answer he anticipated. What she craved was an explanation for the potent, illogical connection between them, but she asked for none. The visible relief on his face was telling, as was his admission that he could not have stopped anyway. The subsequent kiss was a sensory override, a chemical agent designed to dissolve all inquiry. The kiss itself was an exercise in controlled aggression, a calibrated hunger engineered to beguile rather than devour. As he withdrew, her world lost its equilibrium. From this point, Vittorio, no longer just Giovanni, commenced a series of curated realities, beginning with a botanical garden where his exclusive access served as another quiet testament to his influence. They journeyed through humid greenhouses, surrounded by orchids and exotic flora. He identified each species with an improbable, fluid expertise. When Olivia inquired about his knowledge, his reply, "I notice beautiful things," was delivered while his gaze remained fixed on her, transforming a compliment into a statement of acquisition. His next demonstration of power was a rooftop restaurant she had only ever observed from a distance, a bastion of impossible exclusivity. There, the host greeted Vittorio by name, escorting them to a prime table. As Chicago glittered below them like a field of jewels, Olivia found herself instinctively framing a photograph of the vista. "It is more impressive in a storm," Vittorio remarked, his focus entirely on her, not the landscape. "Lightning makes the whole city look alive, dangerous, beautiful." The specific phrasing triggered a neurological shockwave, a sense of déjà vu so potent she had to steady herself. It was the absolute certainty of a memory she did not possess. A phantom memory surfaced, sitting in that exact chair, witnessing a storm assault the city. Vittorio's concern was immediate as her distress became visible. Her question, "Was I here with you before?" caused a visible tightening in his jaw. He deflected, probing gently with the word, "familiar," acknowledging her feeling while sidestepping its origin. After a prolonged, analytical gaze, he offered a platitude about mystical connections between people and places, a statement whose delivery suggested he understood the mechanics perfectly. The psychological unease found physical corroboration back at her apartment, where expensive camera equipment she had never purchased now occupied her shelves. Further evidence presented itself. Books on Italian architecture on a once empty shelf and a new designer jacket in her closet, tagged and perfectly fitted. A call to Megan yielded a predictable defensive denial. Olivia explained the presence of camera gear she couldn't recall acquiring. The silence that followed her mention of the gear's expense was telling. Megan offered another piece of scripted gaslighting, framing potential amnesia as a symptom of her illness. When confronted with the irrefutable fact of a $3,000 lens, she defaulted to the established protocol, deflecting with a question about the vitamins. Her affirmative answer was met with hollow encouragement, advancing the absurd theory that memory could be restored by supplements. This narrative failed to account for the physical evidence. 3 days later, the family's coordinated effort resumed with a call from her mother, time to interrupt her day. The invitation for Vittorio to attend a family dinner was delivered with an unnatural eagerness. Olivia pointed out the anomaly in their behavior, which her mother promptly denied with a painfully artificial brightness. The conversation devolved into a direct rewriting of recent history, with her mother insisting Olivia spoke of him constantly. Following a tense pause, her mother attempted to frame their bizarre behavior as normal parental interest, but every element of their reaction was dissonant. A familiar melody played the wrong key. Olivia agreed, not out of desire, but out of a strategic need to observe all the actors together on one stage. That Saturday, Vittorio's vehicle sliced through the suburban night. His attire was a study in expensive nonchalance, dark trousers and a burgundy shirt that likely cost more than her monthly rent. When she probed for anxiety, he deflected, questioning why he should feel what ordinary people feel when meeting a partner's parents. "I am not most people," he affirmed, his touch a casual assertion of ownership. His confidence that her parents would be gracious was particularly chilling. The word implied a transaction, not a welcome. This expectation of a performance was validated by her mother, who greeted them at the door, vibrating with nervous tension. The welcoming remarks were stilted, rehearsed. Her father emerged, and the handshake between the two men was smooth, yet charged. Vittorio's polite gratitude was met with a gaze that was not paternal, but intensely evaluative. Her father's opening remark, acknowledging Vittorio's business in import, export, and other fields, was a clear signal that this was not a social call, but an assessment. The men's discussion of finance becomes background noise to a more subtle drama in the kitchen, where a mother's trembling hands betray a carefully guarded composure. Her insistence on perfection is the first signal of a deeper anxiety, a performance of normalcy that her daughter immediately begins to deconstruct. The mother retreats behind the defined role of a parent meeting a partner, a defense against scrutiny. Simultaneously, Vittorio executes a masterful charm offensive, weaving a manufactured history of loss in Italy to forge an instant, disarming connection with her parents. Giovanni's deployment of a fictional history is a calculated strategy to fast-track sympathy. This accelerated intimacy registers as a flaw in the social script, an inorganic bonding process. A subsequent private meeting with the father shifts the tone from social to transactional, suggesting a negotiation has been settled. The mother's swift acceptance of Giovanni is met with probing questions she cannot adequately answer. Her justifications are empty, her body language stiff and automated. When challenged, she defaults to the unassailable logic of intuition, a familiar strategy for deflecting genuine inquiry. Confronted, the mother offers a cryptic appeal to trust in a larger, unseen plan, framing the situation as ultimately beneficial. This veiled admission of a hidden agenda is cut short by the men's return, a timely interruption that preserves the tenuous peace. Giovanni's departure is a performance of flawless warmth, a stark contrast to the evening's unsettling atmosphere. In the ensuing silence of the car, his assertion that her parents' approval is paramount feels disproportionate, a clue to a much deeper, pre-existing investment. His reply is a philosophical sidestep, proposing a connection that exists outside of conventional time. This penchant for riddles is a conscious tactic, framing his secrecy not as deceit, but as a truth too complex for simple words, a disarmingly romantic defense. He frames his intense observation of her as a form of profound devotion, suggesting a knowledge so deep it resembles memory. This conflation of study with intimacy is a deeply unsettling proposition, one her rational mind identifies as impossible given their too-weak acquaintance. He reframes her disbelief, shifting the argument from the realm of logic to the realm of faith. His plea is for trust, not understanding, punctuated by a gesture of calculated tenderness. Her intellect demands facts, but she capitulates to his performance of emotional vulnerability. Her whispered consent allows physical intimacy to temporarily silence her cognitive dissonance. Yet a powerful instinct persists, signaling a critical, withheld truth. The narrative then shifts scenes, moving from the personal domain to Vittorio's inner circle, a place she has only observed from a distance. They enter a private, dimly lit room, an environment designed to intimidate. Her attire for the evening is not her own, but a costume he has provided, fitting her perfectly. His stated purpose is display. He wants his associates to witness her. His touch on her knee is a possessive anchor, a nonverbal claim of ownership through the fabric. He confirms her role is to be understood as important by the collective. Inside, she is met with the uniform, appraising gaze of 15 older men, a silent tribunal. The embrace between the men signals a long-standing, powerful alliance. She is presented to Franco Bellini, whose firm handshake is a prelude to a rapid, invasive visual inventory. His polite words are hollow, contradicted by the intensity of his examination. On Vittorio's face is not pleasure, but calculation, a flicker of concern. His touch remains a constant, a recurring assertion of control. The dialogue, veiled as business, operates with a coded subtext, linguistically isolating her and reinforcing her outsider status. A polite question about her work serves as a prelude to a formal toast. The use of the possessive our Giovanni functions as a public claim of ownership by the collective, a claim that, by proximity, now appears to encompass her as well. Franco's gaze is a source of constant pressure, a relentless evaluation. A silent, loaded glance exchanged between him and Vittorio heightens her disorientation, an indecipherable signal just before another man turns his attention directly upon her. A man's verbal slip, asking how she is settling back in, detonates her perceived reality. The phrase implies a shared history that her memory rejects. A cognitive bomb she masks with the defense mechanism of a polite smile to hide a sudden vertigo. Vittorio's hand tightens, a non-verbal admission of his own distress at the mistake. A brief flash of raw emotion crosses his features before his composure is restored. Later, at her apartment, his hesitation to enter reveals a man assessing a threat, not a lover returning home. Once inside, he moves through her space with a disquieting familiarity, like one rediscovering a well-known territory. His embrace is urgent, desperate, demanding she validate a shared reality that, for her, has begun to completely unravel. She gives him the affirmation he seeks, and a profound dissonance emerges. Her mind registers the intimacy as new, but her body reacts with an instinctual familiarity, a somatic memory that exists independent of her conscious awareness, hinting at a past connection. He speaks in a language she doesn't recognize, yet the sounds trigger a psychosomatic echo of familiarity. Sleep is impossible. Driven by a powerful, unresolved suspicion, she is compelled from the bed to seek a tangible answer to the mystery. A compulsive need leads her to violate his privacy. In his jacket, she discovers roughly 12 photographs of them in committed scenarios, complete with wedding rings. The images are a direct contradiction of her memory, a catalyst for a full-scale mental crisis. The settings in the pictures are entirely alien to her. The most potent artifact, a professional wedding portrait, delivers a physical shockwave. The image serves as perfect, impossible proof of a profound and terrifying void in her own history. She also finds an invoice for a 16 by 20-inch custom frame, noted as a rush order. This small detail proves a recent, deliberate effort to construct this false history, solidifying the chilling realization that she is being systematically manipulated. A choked sound escapes her as he materializes in the doorway. His eyes fix on the photographs, and his face pales in silent confession. With a voice constricted by shock, she holds up the portrait of their unremembered wedding. The void in her memory manifests in her voice, a litany of acute distress. He approaches cautiously, a study in appeasement. But his defense, a delicate balance between lie and omission, collapses under her stare. She casts the photos aside, a violent rejection of the life they portray. Her anguish transforms into an existential crisis, a questioning of her very identity. His attempt at a placating touch is met with a hostile recoil. As her world dissolves, he offers a look of pained understanding, professing a just cause for his betrayal. The word "we" lands with devastating weight, expanding the conspiracy until it encompasses everyone she trusts. She recoils from his touch as if from a flame. Pressed for an explanation, he falters, ultimately taking refuge behind the authority of doctors and their twisted logic of protection. His composure finally breaks, revealing his stated objective: to help you remember. The confession lands with physical force, causing her to collapse. From the floor, she speaks the clinical diagnosis herself: amnesia. He confirms it is the result of an accident. He reveals the chilling timeline. An incident 6 weeks prior erased 2 years of her life. Suddenly, disconnected anomalies, the medication, her mother's strained kindness, a friend's constant watchfulness, snap into a horrifying, coherent conspiracy. The betrayal is absolute. "You chose to seduce me again, not to tell me," she accuses, her voice edged with venom. He deflects, citing doctor's orders to recreate their bond naturally as a safer method. A broken, hysterical laugh escapes her. To her, his cure is indistinguishable from madness itself. He positions himself as a supplicant, pleading that every lie was a desperate act to avoid losing her. Her response is a single, cold command to leave. At the door, his final words are a declaration of love, a last attempt to assert some truth within the wreckage of their fabricated reality. Adrift in a liminal state where perception itself had become unreliable, she was a stranger in her own home, the artifacts of a life she couldn't recall. A life with the man they called her husband formed a museum of her amnesia. Into this profound quiet, the shrill summons of her phone intruded, a signal from her friend Megan puncturing the void. The conversation unfolded like a pre-written script, with her friend's call serving as a perfectly timed narrative beat. Her immediate accusation met with a confirmation of complicity, a treachery rooted in the sterile environment of the hospital. The mantra of medical advice echoed as a hollow justification, a flimsy shield against her focus on the architecture of the prolonged deception. Megan presented a distorted rationale that a constructed falsehood could somehow nurture an authentic emotional truth. Olivia repudiated this entire philosophy, severing the connection to descend into an isolated state of reflection. Her reality had fractured into countless irreconcilable pieces, and the ghost of his presence haunted the air she breathed. Emerging from a 3-day fugue state, she began a forensic examination of her own life with the objectivity of a stranger. The initial evidence appeared in her financial records, anomalous deposits and inexplicable transfers culminating in the irrefutable link. Shared accounts under the name Giovanni Moretti, a testament to their intertwined existence. Her inquiry uncovered a passport, its pages chronicling a European history she did not possess. Stamps from Milano, Roma, and Fenzi, all dated within the previous year, served as official markers in a timeline that belonged to everyone but her, deepening the chasm in her consciousness. A digital excavation of her laptop revealed the spectral remnants of a deleted life, medical consultations, bridal fittings, and wedding spreadsheets. This electronic footprint provided incontrovertible evidence of the terrifying central thesis. An entire 2-year period of her identity had been excised. Following a 20-minute journey, she presented herself at the home of Lauren, another architect of her false reality. Her unannounced presence and aggressive demand for clarity signaled a crucial power shift. She dismantled the soothing platitudes, demanding a complete and immediate account. The subject of the experiment had now become its lead investigator. Lauren prefaced her account with a caution about the complexity of the truth before revisiting the events of 6 weeks ago. She depicted a vehicle not losing control, but being methodically driven off the road on a remote highway 2 hours outside the city. In that moment, the concept of accident evaporated, supplanted by the far more sinister term assault. Lauren's composure faltered as she disclosed that the attack was a calculated maneuver orchestrated by adversaries of Giovanni's organization. The car, she explained, had overturned 3 times, remaining hidden for almost an hour. The knowledge of such deliberate malice began to seep in, a creeping frost of deferred horror. When asked about the severity, Lauren recited a clinical inventory of destruction, a significant head trauma, multiple fractures, and extensive internal hemorrhaging. She described the medical flight and the induced coma to mitigate cerebral swelling, her expression collapsing. "We believed you were gone." She added that Giovanni had maintained a 2-week sleepless watch, simply holding her hand. "But I woke up." "Yes, after 14 days. When you regained consciousness, the preceding 2 years had vanished. Your personal timeline had regressed." She had no recollection of Giovanni, their marriage, or their life together. The diagnosis was retrograde amnesia, a predictable outcome of such an injury. "So the group decision was to lie." "It wasn't a lie," Lauren countered, her movement betraying her agitation. The neurologist cautioned that forcibly reintroducing the memories could cause catastrophic psychological damage. A more delicate approach was recommended, to let the relationship reform naturally, in the hope that memories would resurface without further trauma. "We all consented to let you rediscover him unburdened by history." "That is a sickness. It was a strategy for survival." "Olivia, you were on the verge of death," Lauren implored. "Your husband was disintegrating. We were shielding you." The designation husband landed like a physical blow. "He is a stranger to me." "But he wasn't. The woman you were. She adored him completely." "That woman is not me, correct?" Lauren moved nearer. "But you developed feelings for him a second time." "Within weeks, that same affinity ignited between you. That must signify something." Before Olivia could counter, the doorbell rang. A look at her phone bleached the color from Lauren's expression. "Your parents are here." "You summoned them." "They had a right to know you uncovered the truth." They came in, their features arranged into masks of controlled concern. Her mother moved to embrace her, an affection her body instinctively rejected. "My love, we are so sorry. We considered telling you constantly." "So why did you refrain?" Her father collapsed onto the couch, appearing to have aged 10 years. "Because confronting you with a 2-year gap, a lost marriage, and a violent attack seemed far crueler. How was anyone supposed to absorb that information? So your solution was to let me think I was losing my mind." "Never," her mother asserted, gripping her hands. "We were protecting you, hoping you would recover naturally. It was the only method we could conceive." She pulled her hands away. "I require the medical records, the complete set, immediately." Her father presented his phone, and a deluge of documents populated her inbox. Admission paperwork, cerebral imaging, and neurological assessments detailing Olivia Parker's severe traumatic brain injury from 6 weeks prior. While the information was irrefutable, the chasm between data and belief remained vast. "I must speak with Giovanni," she finally declared. "Darling, perhaps it's too soon." "No, I have to see him right now." Her mother yielded with a reluctant agreement. "I will contact him." He appeared in less than 15 minutes, suggesting he had been waiting nearby. Upon his entrance, the profound anguish in his expression caused an involuntary tightening in her own chest. "Olivia," he uttered, his voice heavy, "may we speak in private?" Lauren's bedroom offered the sole sanctuary. They positioned themselves on opposite sides of the bed, a chasm of neutrality separating them. "Explain it all," she directed. "Start at the very beginning. Omit nothing." Giovanni rested against the wall as though for physical support. "Our paths crossed 2 years ago at your gallery opening." He was attending for business, but her photography captivated him. From our first conversation, my world was irrevocably altered. "What is your profession?" she inquired. The unvarnished truth. "I manage an organization. The public narrative is import-export. Beneath the surface, our activities are clandestine. Some enterprises are illicit, others are morally ambiguous." His gaze remained steady. "I am not a virtuous man, Olivia, but for you I made the attempt." "Then my husband is the lawbreaker?" "You wed a man," he responded, "who respected you enough to give you an option. After 3 months, I disclosed the full extent of my world. I anticipated your departure." His tone softened. "Yet you remained. For what reason?" "You perceived beyond my circumstances to the person I aspired to become. You had faith in my capacity for change, and your love was formidable." He moved from the wall. "We were wed 6 months ago. It was an intimate ceremony, only relatives and our closest companions. You held white roses, saying they evoked the first snowfall." These specifics triggered a faint resonance within her. White roses, snow, a sliver of memory lost before it could be held. "The attack," she stated, her voice devoid of emotion. "That was my failure. I should have assigned protection. I should never have permitted you to accept that assignment." He spoke of her passion for the project, a force he felt powerless to deny. His words laced with self-reproach. Their adversaries exploited this. They monitored her and awaited an opportune moment. Then they ran her vehicle off the road. When she asked who, he answered simply, "Our competition. They've been dealt with." The statement carried an unmistakable and cold finality. "And you concluded that a lie was preferable to this reality." He cited the neurologist's unequivocal judgment. Dr. Reynolds had warned that coercing the memories could result in lasting psychological harm, that allowing a natural return was the sole compassionate option. Giovanni folded his arms, a defensive posture. "Therefore, we orchestrated our first meeting, our initial dates. We offered you an opportunity to build a bond free from the burden of history, and yet the bond formed regardless." The confession was clearly agonizing. "To a man who is an apparition." "I am no apparition." He drew nearer. "Every instant was authentic. The sole absent component was your memory, but the emotion between us was real." "How can I know that?" "Because you can sense it." He extended a hand toward hers. She did not retract it. "Your body retains what your consciousness has lost. Your reactions to me, your laugh, the looks you give when you believe I'm not observing, those are not a performance. They are evidence." She wished to refute him, to hold on to her rage. Yet with his hand on hers, a warmth diffusing through her, the connection was irrefutable. A profound, instinctual part of her recognized him, while her conscious mind was a barren landscape. "I require time," she murmured. "Take whatever you need." He let go of her hand, his reluctance palpable. "I will remain, for however long it requires, even if your memory never recovers, even if you select a different path, I will remain." "What if I am not the person you wed?" "You are. Memory is not the sole determinant of self. You remain Olivia, the one who finds beauty in tempests, who cycles through 5 languages under duress, who consumes ice cream directly from the container past midnight." A melancholy smile appeared. "You are still the woman I prize above my own existence." She departed Lauren's residence alone, declining all offers of transport. She needed the solitude of the walk to confront the crushing weight of a past she could not inhabit. Approaching her home, Her phone vibrated with a call from an unfamiliar number. The voice on the line introduced itself. Later, she kept to the far side of their bed, an ocean of distance and a few inches of space. Just before daybreak, he covered her with a blanket and placed a glass of water beside her. Their movements were instinctual, a physical language for when the conscious mind is adrift. They were navigating a new connection, one without a map. "Dr. Reynolds," the voice on the phone continued, "your family requested I contact you. I would like to arrange an appointment to review your progress." Progress. The word framed her as a damaged subject. Perhaps she was. "Tomorrow," she consented. "I will be there tomorrow." Alone, she confronted photographs of a life she could not own. This vision of a radiant doppelganger, held by an unfamiliar man, created a profound psychic fracture and confirmed her dissociative state. No memories surfaced, only the deep, corrosive certainty of an irreplaceable loss. Dr. Reynolds's office on the highest floor of a forgotten medical tower felt unnervingly familiar. It was all glass walls, a sweeping urban vista, and a design of tranquil, neutral tones. A receptionist used her name before she could offer it. "Miss Parker, Dr. Reynolds is expecting you. You may go in." The neurologist seemed younger than she'd envisioned, perhaps 45, his gaze kind behind wire-framed glasses. He stood. "Olivia, I am so glad you came. You're the doctor who prescribed the medication." Her words were an indictment. "Yes, the narrative we gave your family was post-viral immune support," he confirmed, motioning to a seat. "The prescription was for neurological agents to aid your recovery from a traumatic brain injury." She sat, her legs feeling unsteady. Everyone repeated that clinical phrase, traumatic brain injury, as if its sterile delivery could neutralize the horror. "Is there a term you'd prefer?" he asked. "I'd prefer the unvarnished truth, the entire file. No more careful redactions or polite medical narratives." He retrieved her records, turning his screen to show her the brain scans that filled the monitor. Her brain, before and after the collision. The images revealed a ruin she could feel but not interpret. "6 weeks ago, your vehicle left the highway, causing severe head trauma. The impact produced a subdural hematoma, cerebral swelling, and extensive contusions to your frontal and temporal lobes." His finger traced the damaged topography on the screen. "We put you in a medically induced coma to manage the intracranial pressure. You were unconscious for 14 days. Upon waking, the result was retrograde amnesia, a precise 2-year void. Earlier memories were intact, later ones erased." She stared at the images of her brain, a wounded and alien thing. "That 2-year period is clinically significant. This memory deficit doesn't follow a predictable pattern. The trauma damaged regions vital for memory encoding and retrieval. This specific window likely constitutes your last, most consolidated block of memory." Regarding her prognosis, Dr. Reynolds paused, weighing his words with deliberate care. "A partial return of memory is more probable than a full restoration. You might get flashes, with emotion preceding fact, but a complete recovery isn't guaranteed. Revealing everything at once would have caused profound psychological damage. To confront someone with such a deep fissure in their identity, especially concerning a marriage, can induce severe depression or worse. Our approach was a gradual reintroduction. Research shows experiential relearning is safer than cognitive flooding. You perceived deception, we saw therapeutic intervention. Our sole aim was to shield your mind during its healing. This method, effective in similar cases, lets emotions reform organically, which can even trigger memory recall. And should it fail, The process still forges a new emotional bond with your spouse, granting the relationship a fresh start. The consultation was interrupted by a sudden arrival. Her parents and Giovanni entered, their timing clearly coordinated. Her mother's face was stained with recent tears. Her mother spoke, acknowledging her daughter's demand for the complete medical record. Her terms were absolute. Every hospital document, the accident summary, and a log of every choice made while she was unconscious. Her father handed her a large folder, confirming it contained every diagnosis, consultation, and ethical debate about her treatment. She accepted the documents, her hands trembling slightly. Giovanni remained framed by the doorway, a deliberate distance that couldn't conceal his internal turmoil. She looked straight at him, demanding a complete narrative of the event. He moved closer, honoring an invisible line, and began the account of her drive home from a job 2 hours from Chicago. He spoke of a meeting with Franco concerning a burgeoning turf conflict. The opposition was Russian, attempting to commandeer his shipping channels. His refusal to concede prompted them to retaliate by targeting his wife. A muscle in his jaw tightened. The enemy had surveilled her for weeks, mapping her patterns and identifying her vulnerabilities. The assault was tactical. One vehicle intercepted her, trapping her car for a high-speed side collision. Her car tore through a guardrail, plunged into a ravine, and rolled 3 times. His eye twitched, an involuntary echo of the trauma. They didn't reach you for 47 minutes. You had internal bleeding. Her mother gasped. Her father held her steady. She was airlifted to Northwestern Memorial for emergency surgery on the hematoma, then transferred to the intensive care unit. Giovanni's hands were balled into white-knuckled fists. He explained he had arrived mid-surgery and had not left her side during the 2 weeks she lay unconscious. The perpetrators, he stated, were no longer an issue, a phrase whose meaning was unmistakable. Dr. Reynolds then outlined her post-coma state as disoriented, adding that the first person she had asked for was her sister. When her family appeared, the 2-year chasm in her memory became painfully obvious as she discussed past events as if they were current. She had no recollection of Giovanni and grew agitated when confronted with the missing time. Cognitive evaluations later confirmed the diagnosis: a focused retrograde amnesia that had selectively erased all memory of her life with him. Her memory of him was a complete void. She had to be told what words she had used to reject him. A tremor entered Giovanni's voice as he recounted her calling him a stranger. His claim of marriage had ignited her panic, her fear twisting into accusations. The wound of that encounter was still visible on his face. He explained this was the point they sought professional guidance. The specialists concurred that forcing her memory could shatter her psyche. She termed their solution an elaborate deception. Her mother reframed it as recreating her life, describing how they had rebuilt her world from her apartment to her professional life. She felt they had engineered a second courtship. "We merely opened a door," Giovanni countered gently. "You were the one who felt a connection." Dr. Reynolds then presented the medical files, encouraging her to seek an external review to validate their methods. He defended their protocol with absolute conviction. She requested to see the house she supposedly shared with Giovanni. He gently corrected her cynical tone, affirming that it was, unequivocally, their home. The 30-minute drive was a silent transition from the city's core to a realm of private estates. Automated gates glided open, revealing the home, a structure of stone and glass on impeccably manicured land. The interior was a paradox, a place entirely unknown to her, yet every object reflected her own aesthetic. Photographs chronicling their shared existence were displayed throughout. The images presented a history she could not access. He showed her to an office of her own design, a testament to a successful career. But the master bedroom was the precipice, a space so saturated with proof of their shared intimacy and life. Every element of the house testified to a life lived in tandem. He then offered her a leather-bound journal, explaining it was her own chronicle of their relationship. A random entry, dated 8 months prior and written in her hand, detailed a weekend in Napa filled with intimate moments. The passage articulated the moment she defined her love for him, a feeling rooted in being completely seen and unconditionally accepted. Tears blurred the script as she faced the emotional certainty of her past self, a conviction that now felt utterly foreign. "I don't know that person," she whispered. Giovanni's voice broke as he apologized, blaming his perilous world for its failure to keep her safe. She studied him, the man she was developing feelings for again, now revealed as her husband, the orchestrator of this grand illusion. She confessed she could never become the woman from the journal. He absolved her of that expectation immediately. When she voiced her fear that the memories were irretrievable, he suggested they could construct a new life together. He vowed to wait for her indefinitely, the steadfast husband. When she protested that it wasn't fair, he called his loyalty the only righteous act he had ever committed. She closed the journal, viewing the house not as a home, but as a shrine to a woman she had lost. She requested time alone to process everything. He consented, ceding the entire estate to her. She asked where he would stay. He gestured vaguely toward other properties. He explained his departure was necessary for her to make an uninfluenced decision. Alone, she roamed the curated rooms, touching objects, searching for any flicker of recognition, but felt nothing. In the bathroom, she discovered the supplements prescribed to ensure her compliance, disguised as tools for her recovery. She flushed them, a final act of rejecting the fabrication. A call came from her sister Megan, to whom she confessed her profound disorientation. Her sister acknowledged the flawed ethics and apologized. She grasped their intent was to protect her, yet the betrayal stung. Questioned about Giovanni, she conceded her feelings were authentic. Her body was drawn to him, a visceral knowledge her mind couldn't rationalize. This conflict was the heart of her crisis. Her sister advised her to trust that instinct. The focus shifted from what was lost to what was present. Lying in their shared bed, she pressed her face into his pillow, breathing in his scent in a desperate attempt to excavate a single memory of their love or their wedding day. Model. Her struggle yielded only the phantom pain of an inaccessible past. Yet below, a more foundational truth surfaced, an instinctual awareness of their connection, not a recollection. This became her sole tether during the ensuing week of therapy and seclusion. Her journal became an unsolved mystery, its pages offering no clues to her former self. The 5th day brought her sister, collapsing under the weight of remorse for her role in the orchestrated falsehood. She admitted tonight's loss to tears, a prisoner in the labyrinth of their making. The complete narrative was finally unveiled at dinner, beginning with Giovanni's desperate, panicked plea from the hospital. A cautious, gradual reintroduction to her life was deemed the only viable strategy by her family and Dr. Reynolds. Her sister even admitted to practicing the deception, framing it as a necessary shield against psychological harm. The stated objective was to prevent a total mental collapse. While the logic was clear, comprehension did not equal forgiveness. Resignation eclipsed her rage. Of Giovanni, she spoke of a somatic bond that defied her cognitive void. Then Lauren's arrival shifted the narrative. Lauren presented a curated visual archive, a chronicle of her life and affection for Giovanni. The images depicted the intentional cultivation of their relationship. Lauren attested that she had witnessed her consciously choose Giovanni, fully aware of his background. Her previous self had been resolute, her devotion unwavering. Lauren observed this pattern of certainty was now repeating. To her fear of permanent amnesia, Lauren offered a powerful reinterpretation, the unique opportunity to elect him again. This concept brought profound peace to her fractured psyche. Giovanni honored her request for distance, his presence reduced to concise messages, promising his unwavering patience. On the 8th day, she summoned him, demanding the complete account. His arrival in less than 20 minutes suggested a man poised for this very call. Their reconstruction began in a quiet bistro. In a gesture of shared history, he ordered for them both, a move she permitted. He then began to spin the narrative of their shared past, starting with an art gallery 2 years prior. He recounted the instant his perspective altered upon meeting the curious gaze of a stranger. An immediate rapport ignited a 4-hour conversation. She inquired about the revelation of his darker affiliations. He specified it was after 3 months, in a safe location where he presented the unvarnished facts, anticipating her departure. At this point in the story, he took her hand. He explained that she remained focusing on his potential rather than his past. Their next destination was the church of their wedding. Giovanni reconstructed the day, the blossoms adorning her hair, the vows that moved him to tears, and her pledge of loyalty through any adversity. He affirmed her fidelity to that promise, even after the attempt on her life. In that space, a phantom feeling surfaced, a somatic trace held within her body. She labeled it an undefinable something distinct from memory. This confession ignited hope within him. He recited the physician's hypothesis that emotional memory precedes cognitive recall. She waved away the jargon, requesting only his presence. In the stillness of the sanctuary, she abandoned intellectual effort and surrendered to sensation. Their journey continued to a rooftop lounge, a place from her recent post-amnesia life. Giovanni guided her to an exact location, summoning the memory of a past thunderstorm. He detailed how she had photographed the lightning, terming it a celestial battle over the metropolis. Positioned behind her, he softly narrated her first declaration of love, uttered on that very spot as the tempest unleashed its fury. This account unleashed a psychic tremor, an explosive surge of déjà vu. In one flawless instant, she was transported, feeling the downpour and the certainty of her devotion. The recollection disintegrated before she could secure it, provoking a cry of deep frustration. Yet Giovanni framed this ephemeral flash as a pivotal moment. He pledged to persist, leading them on a pilgrimage through their shared geography for days. Their tour included the botanical garden of his proposal and the shores of their Michigan honeymoon. Every site elicited effective resonances, sensations devoid of narrative. Dr. Reynolds would later validate this process, noting emotion as the primary thread in memory retrieval. The doctor theorized a damaged hippocampus against an intact amygdala, explaining the precedence of feeling over fact. While complete cognitive restoration was not guaranteed, her emotional reality was irrefutable. From this sterile prognosis, a singular choice emerged. She would return home. The decision was visceral, a certainty beyond articulation. Giovanni had been residing separately to grant her space. The sheer relief in his voice upon hearing the news was its own confirmation. He proposed waiting longer, but she insisted he come back to what she termed our house. She uttered the phrase with newfound authority. During her parents' visit, her mother was moved to tears by their synchronized movements in the kitchen, a procedural memory immune to her condition. Her father affirmed her past joy, remarking on its powerful resurgence. He interpreted this second selection as fate's inevitable correction, not mere coincidence. With Megan, the arduous task of restoring trust commenced. It involved viewing video archives, piecing together an unknown existence with Giovanni, from celebrations to the quiet rhythm of daily life. Her on-screen persona was joyful and tactile, her gaze filled with absolute trust. She observed a forgotten state of contentment. Megan had described this as a sense of completeness. Megan believed this feeling was not just possible, but was already re-emerging. 3 weeks passed, they were making breakfast. During the simple ritual, she voiced a fondness for Rain, a characteristic he affirmed was innate to her. In this domestic stillness, an insight crystallized. Though the memories were absent, the underlying emotional architecture persisted. She said his name. He pivoted from the cooktop. She confessed her love, the declaration feeling authentic and present. She could not recall the original instance, she clarified, but this current feeling felt more valuable. He moved suddenly, dropping a utensil as he approached, his hand shaking as he begged her to repeat it. She repeated it, emphasizing it as a present tense decision, not a historical echo. Their subsequent kiss signified both a return and a genesis. They would construct their history anew, integrating mnemonic phantoms as they surfaced. She considered this journey superior to a mere cure, seeing greater significance in a second, deliberate choice. With Rain tracing paths on the glass, they started building a future, unburdened by a past she no longer required. Her present reality had become sufficient. The 3 months following the revelation were a period of radical reconstruction of the subject's reality. Consultations with Dr. Reynolds focused on managing cognitive deficits and ungrievable losses. Minute fragments of her past began to surface. An olfactory trigger like cedar might evoke the phantom scent of the perpetrator's cologne. A melody could activate procedural memory of dance, yet detached from any context. These were effective traces, not integrated memories. Dr. Reynolds noted the brain's compensatory mechanisms. He explained the forging of new neural pathways to preserve effective attachments. The subject perceived this as building upon an unseen foundation, a structure Dr. Reynolds confirmed was intact. Her photography resumed, now reframed as a deliberate act of archival. Her creative work was repurposed into a curated record, a defense against subsequent memory loss. Giovanni, the perpetrator, became her primary subject, documented in staged domesticity. He observed his status as her subject. She affirmed he was her preference. Conversations about the future, suspected repetitions of past discussions, were perceived as novel. Plans were made for offspring and travel to forgotten locales. The residence began to feel like a home. Concurrently, Giovanni's syndicate required documentation for its legitimate business facade. The subject's latent vocational skills resurfaced, unwittingly benefiting her manipulator. The pivotal psychological shift occurred precisely 3 months after Lauren's disclosure, triggered by an atmospheric change the subject had unconsciously craved. On a terrace, against a backdrop of a forming storm, the perpetrator leveraged the atmospheric tension. She expressed an affinity for such weather, to which he replied, "I know." This response solidified the narrative that he was the exclusive guardian of her persona. Upon being questioned, he conceded to 2 years of compulsive monitoring, recasting his pathology as romantic persistence. His recent campaign of gaslighting was presented as a renewed courtship, a narcissistic revision of his calculated psychological abuse. The subject exhibited classic symptoms of a trauma bond, seeking his proximity and vocalizing affection. Her capitulation was reframed as an empowered choice, a defense mechanism to validate her feelings for her abuser. The perpetrator required verbal confirmation of his success, which she provided, thus accepting his constructed reality. A physical act, synchronized with the storm's climax, finalized their psychological pact. His ensuing directive to move indoors served as a minor compliance test. She fought the impulse, seeking to imprint the scene upon her consciousness. Amid the tempest's rage, she catalogued every detail of his face and the nuance in his gaze, attempting to sculpt an authentic memory from an incident founded on complete fabrication. During a fleeting period of manufactured security, the architect of her reality introduced the idea of parenthood. The subject acknowledged this as a mutual aspiration from a life she no longer possessed, a new anchor binding her to him. Her acquiescence to this future solidified the carefully reconstructed artifice of their relationship. His visible relief at her agreement betrayed the immense value he placed on her reproductive utility. Paradoxically, their ongoing therapy served only to reinforce the fabricated timeline, facilitating a curated retrieval of memory fragments that fit his narrative. Shards of memory, a wedding, distant travels began to emerge, evidence of a slow, fragmented neurological repair. Concurrently, her professional life flourished, her art becoming a deliberate testament to this meticulously reconstructed sense of self. Giovanni provided steadfast support for her artistic pursuits. 6 months following the tempestuous night, they committed to conceiving a child, a strategic act of future building over past reclamation. A positive result 3 months later signaled the inauguration of their new chapter. The subject voiced the truth of her pregnancy in a whisper, a duality of profound elation and visceral terror. Her manipulator calmly normalized this internal conflict as a standard human response. The moment occurred precisely 12 months after the cataclysm that had both annihilated and reconstructed her identity. Within her studio, she sifted through a photo album, an archive of a life lived with her captor. A few faces triggered faint recognition, while most remained anonymous figures in a story she was told was hers. Giovanni's arrival and inquiry were met with a simple gesture towards her pregnant form. The knowledge that it was a girl, confirmed the previous week, had elicited a genuine emotional response, yet one disconnected from any remembered desire for a daughter. He directed her to a photograph, a subtle test of her recall, probing if she could access that moment of joy. She admitted the day was a blank, though she could observe the happiness in her own captured expression. With a gentle correction, he shifted her language from past to present, reinforcing the fiction of a continuous, unbroken joy. The subject is now resigned to the permanent voids in her personal history. Closing the album, she prompted Giovanni for the story of their meeting. He paused, seeking clarification, the authentic version or his constructed one. Her request for both narratives was an explicit concession, granting him full control over her past, both real and fabricated. He spun a mythology around the life she inhabited, but could not reclaim, positioning himself as the singular constant in her past and present. Outside, the onset of rain began, a fateful, recurring trigger, a meteorological echo of her own internal tempest. As the rain fell, she contemplated the sequence of identities she had occupied. She expressed gratitude for his actions, a cognitive reframing of his deep deception into a gift that enabled a romantic rebirth, thereby validating his entire campaign of manipulation. She presented her repeated choice of him as a rare and precious phenomenon, the final keystone in the architecture of her trauma rationalization. His hand covering hers on her abdomen was a silent assertion of dominion. His gratitude was for her compliance. He articulated his gratitude for her dual selection of him, for a love that navigated without the map of memory. The subject, in turn, declared memory irrelevant, professing a profound, instinctual knowledge of his essence. The psychological conditioning had achieved its ultimate objective. Against the backdrop of falling rain, they designed a future, an edifice constructed upon a foundation of curated lies and fractured history. In 6 months, a daughter would enter a world circumscribed by paternal control and a mother's devoted captivity. With vast sections of their shared history permanently erased, she now focuses on the deliberate construction of present-tense experiences. This shift is not a choice, but a necessary survival mechanism, prioritizing the stability of her fabricated reality over a past she cannot access. Her father's emotional displays on video calls were palpable, his tears a testament to his own investment in the fiction. The wider support network, encompassing both Megan and Lauren, provided the gentle, consistent reinforcement required to maintain the subject's carefully curated existence.